Hi everyone. Hi, I don't know if you can see me. Good evening and welcome to the Access to Justice webinar. Please, can you confirm if you can hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, I don't know if anyone can hear me, but if you're using an emoji, I'd like to see the emojis flood my screen. So please just keep sending your emojis, and if somebody can just say hello to me, I'll be very happy. So I don't know, maybe might decide to. Okay, thank you so much, Abisola. Okay, thank you, thank you. Probably you're the representative. So you're all welcome to, oh, thank you so much, Albert. You're welcome to the Access to Justice webinar. My name is Esther. I don't know if you can see me. Can you see me? I'd need to see another
We can
reaction.
see
Can you
you.
see my face?
Yes, we
Can anyone see me? Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining this evening. We're so happy to have you. So we have just been waiting to have others join us. First of all, my name is Esther Estienne. I'm an associate at the Firm Advisory, and I head the Access to Justice team at the Firm Advisory. So I know that this webinar was earlier scheduled to take place by 11 a.m., but because we have just been trying to be considerate and to accommodate our participants that are in the diaspora, we had to shift it to 4 p.m. So I sincerely apologized for that. And I promise you, you're going to have an amazing experience here. I mean, who wouldn't talk about human rights issues in Nigeria? Each and every one of us, we have faced it, whether at the market, whether, I mean, even in the offices. I know we have experienced issues of human rights. Might not be directed at you, but maybe somebody around you must have experienced it. So it's a call for concern for that everybody would need to talk about it. So we have put together this webinar to look at all of these issues that surrounds access to justice. Why is it that people find it difficult to, get justice in court, such that they even have to resort to jungle justice? Some people even get to sleep on their rights. They don't even, try to push for it. So this webinar is going to discuss all of those issues. And at the end of the day, would arrive at, we'll come to a I don't know, maybe a collaborative synergy where as stakeholders, because on this, so our speakers, our panelists are, gotten from the different stakeholders in the justice system. We have the judge, we have the lawyers, we have representatives from the CSO, and we have you as well, because this conversation will not just be left to our speakers. Each and every one of us will have to contribute. We need to put our voices there to chant the cause of justice for our dear nation. So many things has happened in Nigeria this year, last year. I mean, a lot of things has happened. You've heard of it. Issues of injustice has happened recently. You are aware of the 119 minors that were arraigned in court. Why? Because they were part of the protest. Who wouldn't protest? So this webinar will look at all of those issues. Why is it that the government are not saying anything? Why can't people have access to the courts? Who would they go to when they have issues of human rights violation? What would they do? So this webinar would look at all of those issues. And I know this is a step, not like we're going to solve all the problems around injustice in Nigeria, but this is the step in the right direction. So next on our agenda today, we've started already, and I am happy we have at least a good number to start. More persons will be joining us as we progress. So next on the agenda, I'd like to introduce the managing partner, Ms. Chinenye Nwanaka, to come on board and give us the opening remark. So Ms. Chinenye Nwanaka, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Can you please give me 2 minutes, please, and then I'll come on for the opening remarks. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Also, I was just wondering, do we have our keynote speaker, Justice Anukam, because I'm trying to contact her as well.
All right, so while we wait for Ms. Chinenye to come on board, I'd just like us to indicate where we're joining from. You can just use the chat box, just indicate where you're joining from. For me, I'm joining from the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. I'm in Nigeria, so please, for you, I'd like to know where you're joining from. You can just indicate in the chat box. Are you joining from the UK? Where are you joining from? Canada? I would like to see you. Are you a Nigerian like myself? I'd like to see you. So please rep your location. I'm waiting. I'd like to see. Okay, Miss Farah, I've seen you. Nigeria, Abuja precisely. Naomi, I've seen you from Abuja. Thank you so much for joining. I'd like to see more. Please just keep it coming. I'd like to see. I know, right? There's no light anywhere. The national grid has collapsed. I mean, that's a problem. I know, right? Hi, Dorcas, Obina. Obina from the UK. Hi, Sylvester. Nice to meet you. You're all welcome. I know, I mean, somebody just mentioned that we have national grid problem. I hope that our webinar will be able to address the issue as well, because these are the issues that lead up to human rights abuse. Because imagine that we don't have light. What if we decide to protest? They'll now arrest everybody or start, train taggers. But we thank God still that we're surviving. So just keep it coming. I'd like to see your location. I'd like to know where you're joining from while we wait for Ms. Chinenye to join us. So while that is going on, I'd just like to speak briefly about the Access to Justice initiative. I'd like to share my screen now. Hi, Ms. Funke. Good to have you. Oh, so we have one of our speakers on board right now. So good to have you. Hi, Esther. You're welcome as well. I mean, I'm so excited that we have this number of persons join us. So human rights issues is just, you cannot just sit on the fence. It's something everybody will have to talk about, something everybody should be concerned about, because if it doesn't happen to you, it will happen to your brother, happen to your neighbor, and it will happen to people around you. So what does the Bible say? You have to be your brother's keeper, which is why we're here. So I'm just going to talk briefly about our Access to Justice initiative. So at this point, I'd like to share my screen. Naomi, please just assist me with that. You can just help me share my screen. So I'll just pause my video for now while Naomi will share her screen. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Naomi. So I know you've been hearing of the Access to Justice initiative of the FEMA Advisory. But first of all, the FEMA Advisory is a law and consulting firm. We are headquartered here in Abuja, Nigeria. But we constantly spread our tentacles to other parts of Africa, the world at large. And aside being a law firm, we have also thought about, how we can give back to the society, which is why we have our Access to Justice initiative. So Access to Justice was, started far back as 2017, where, we saw the many things that happened in the country, even before the EndSARS protest, injustice has been on a constant in our dear country. So the Access to Justice initiative was formed by our managing partner, Ms. Chineye Nwanaka, and the purpose was for us to ensure that people have access to justice at all times, irrespective of whether you have money or you do not have money. Our focus was even on marginalized societies, marginalized communities, the less privileged. So they constantly get their rights violated, but what do they do at the end of the day? They don't even know where to run to or who to go to. So our Access to Justice stands as the cornerstone of the FEMA Advisory's CSR. So we embody the commitment to social equity and legal empowerment. Our initiative is designed to ensure that people have the ability to boldly seek legal redress for violations of their rights. Naomi, please, you can give me the next slide. So our Access to Justice rests on the unwavering belief that justice is a fundamental right that should be accessible to every individual, regardless of their socioeconomic status. So our vision paints a picture of a free and just society where people will have a holistic understanding of their rights and have access to justice at all times. So at its core, our Access to Justice rests on several crucial pillars, as you can see on the screen. The first is legal empowerment, which involves educating individuals about their rights and the mechanisms available to protect their rights. Secondly, it involves removing barriers that prevents people from accessing legal services, whether these barriers are financial, geographical, linguistic, or cultural. We assist in eliminating those barriers. And thirdly, our third pillar focuses on institutional reforms, which is why we're even having this webinar, to ensure that our justice system is efficient, transparent, and responsive to the needs of all the citizens. Because why do we have our laws enshrined in the Constitution, yet people cannot even depend on the laws when their rights are being violated? Okay, now you can go over to the next slide. Okay, great. So far we've been able to execute lots of projects in Nigeria, and the highlights of it is, first of all, we've been able to counsel over 300 inmates in the various correctional centers, the Suleja Correctional Center, Kuje Correctional Center, Dupa Prison Farm Centers. So these outreaches went beyond financial support that we had to provide. It also served as a platform for meaningful engagement with the individuals, the incarcerated individuals, the prisoners. So the experiences we've gathered from all of these outreaches has been really and truly life-changing for these inmates, because it's not just about having to secure their release. It's not just about having to talk to them to, create the mental shift, the mindset shift and the mental shift, but creating a chance for them to even know that they can lead better lives. So once they're out of there, what is next for them? We've been able to, get them reunited with their families, and continue their lives from there. And also we've carried out sensitization programs to communities in the FCT. I think that's, okay, yeah, you can see the third slide on the first line. We had community outreaches where we reached over 400 persons in the Jikoi community of the FCT. We have also successfully secured the release of 70 inmates through the payment of fines at the Dupa Prison Farm Centers and the Kuje prisons. We've carried out human rights sensitization projects at secondary schools within the FCT. So the focus of this outreach was to talk to the students about their rights, their child's rights, according to the Child Rights Act, because we have seen that the people that are most vulnerable to abuse are the children. I don't want to say just the girls, but even the boys are also vulnerable. So we've carried out those outreaches to the schools, as you can see. Naomi, you can show us the next slide. And then in 2018, our Access to Justice initiative, we received the Social Impact Award from the former Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osibajo. This prestigious accolade was bestowed upon our managing partner for her pro bono Access to Justice initiative. So you can, why am I just talking? I'm not even seeing any reaction. Can you just give the Access to Justice some accolades? Just give us some thumbs up. I want to see you clap. I just want to get the reactions, please. Just keep it coming. Are we together? I don't want to be talking to myself. Please, I want to see your reactions to know that we are together. Naomi, you can go to the next slide, please. Yes. So the transformative impact of our work extends far beyond individual cases because we tackle systemic barriers to justice. We have empowered countless Nigerians to effectively solve their legal problems. Our efforts have contributed significantly to the creation of a more equitable justice system that has yielded benefits that ripple through families, through individuals, and communities across Nigeria. So the goal and objectives of our webinar, as you can see on the screen, is to identify and assess key obstacles that impede equitable access to justice in Nigeria. We want to know what are those bureaucracies, what are those bureaucratic bottlenecks that impede, that inhibit, that limits access to justice in Nigeria. And we'll also engage with the stakeholders that we have on our panel in a constructive dialogue. We engage them in a constructive dialogue to, develop innovative solutions to enhance access to justice in Nigeria. And we'll also explore strategies to expand legal aid, where we'll get to, encourage lawyers to take up pro bono services, because why are you a lawyer if you cannot offer pro bono legal services to people who are in need? I remember while we were in the university, when we were asked, okay, so why do you want to be a lawyer? And everybody goes, oh, I want to be a lawyer because I want to be the voice of the voiceless. I want to speak for the helpless. Or when you come into the profession, we get overwhelmed with, cases, with issues that we forget the passion we once had. So please, these are the goals and objectives of our webinar. Yes, Naomi, you can go to the next slide. So the growing case of gender-based violence in Nigeria, as you can see on my slide. So Nigeria has continued to record an increase in cases of sexual and gender-based violence in different states. So groups have raised concerns over the growing number of sexual and gender-based violence, which affects both genders, like I said initially. And this has led to lots of long-term emotional distress. So gender-based violence refers to any type of harm that is perpetrated against a person or group of people because of their factual or perceived sex, gender, sexual orientation, or gender identity. Now, in some parts of the 36 states of Nigeria, findings have shown that gender-based violence cases have reoccurred in recent years, between 2020 and 2024. For instance, in northern part of Nigeria, the Salama Sexual Assault Referral Center in Kafancha and Kaduna State recorded 3,977 cases of sexual and gender-based violence cases since their inception in 2019. And then in Lagos State, they recorded over 24,000 cases of gender-based violence in the last 5 years, meaning from 2019 as well. And these cases include sexual and physical and psychological abuse. All of them were reported at the 20 local government areas in Lagos State. So data shows that between 2017 and 2020, the cases of gender-based violence has been on the rise. You can move to the next slide. Yeah, so you can see also the charts showing that between 2017 and 2020, sexual assault reports from the Sexual Assault Referral Center shows, a higher number of survivors in the country. You can see between 2017 and 2020, there's been like a very there's been a high rate of survivors of sexual-based violence. So we can go to the next slide. I'm so sorry, I'm just having to, put you through all of this to let you understand why this webinar is important. So while we're preparing our, planning for our webinar, we just had to, make reference to the National Action Plan for the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights in Nigeria. So this action plan reinforces the commitment by the present administration, in particular, that they are focused on protecting human rights of Nigerians. Although we're still trying to watch out to see in what way, in what manner, and in what form they want to do that. But the fact that we have this action plan in place, we believe that human rights cases will actually be controlled and well managed. So, ladies and gentlemen, normally you can go to the last slide. I humbly welcome you once again to our webinar today. And I promise you that you're going to be having a very good time. Please don't leave. Just like I said earlier, this is an issue for everybody to talk about. So please stay put as I introduce Ms. Chinenye Nwanaka for, again, the opening remark. Thank you so much, Ma. Please, you can go ahead.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I think we are having some technical challenges with Justice Anukam joining. And so I've been battling with that, trying to send her the link. She said she's having a challenge with the link. Thank you, Esther, for that opening remark. While I'm still trying to get her and our other speaker as well, who is based in the US, Metsu BK. I'm currently in the US as well, and it's past 7 a.m. here. So the time difference has been a challenge working in Nigeria and also working here as well. So, but it's a very important subject that we're covering today, the subject of access to justice. Like Esther mentioned, most of us, when we were in law school, we studied law because we wanted to solve the issue of injustice in our country. And as a result, most of us, spent 6 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever amount of years it took you. And then when you get into practice, you then realize that it's quite challenging because the institutions are quite weak. The institutions we find ourselves in, be it the judiciary, the police, the civil service, and even the NBA as well. I'm trying to turn on my camera. It's a bit dark here. Let me try again. Hold on a second. Okay, I think this should be better. I hope everybody can see me. Okay, so like I mentioned, so being part of this body of practice, I'm sure most of us here are lawyers, and you can indicate on the chat box if you're not, and facing this challenge of being in a profession that a lot of people look down on now, quite frankly. If you talk about election petitions in Nigeria, for instance, most people will tell you, I've had statements like, why get a lawyer when I can bribe a judge? Or why pay a lawyer when I can bribe a judge? And so there's this perception that, the system is so corrupt. Last week, I was privileged to be part of the facilitators from with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group that did a training for lawyers and judges from the Court of Appeal, from the Supreme Court, and state high courts. And this was the second training the third training that we had done with the justice system, with the judges, to make sure that, they're aware of their role when it comes to ease of doing business, when it comes to economic growth and development. Most of the time we're on the road trying to get investors coming to Nigeria. And the challenge is always that perception of corruption in Nigeria. Oh, people feel like if something happens, number one, they won't get justice in time. They feel like the courts are not independent or neutral. Another very important point about the institutions is corruption. So like in the US, there's a particular act that, that goes against bribery of government officials. So I've spoken to investors and fund managers who say, I'm not going to come to Africa or come to Nigeria and invest if I'm going to end up in jail, because of a corrupt African politician or a corrupt African, civil servant and all that. So the fact that there are no hard consequences back home in Nigeria doesn't mean that people in other parts of the world want to risk their life coming to a situation that would make them entangled in corruption. And so why do people have that perception? If our judiciary, if our justice system, if our lawyers were doing their work and enforcing these judgments and just playing their own role in ensuring that the things that are done in a justice, in an equitable way, this whole issue and perception of Nigeria will not be there. Another important point is our youthful population. Unfortunately, because of unemployment and things not going well in the country, you find a lot of young people doing Yahoo, committing crime and all that. That also affects the perception, because people say, oh, they get emails, they get all sorts of fraudulent, and so there's so many layers of this when it comes to the perception of Nigeria and how it affects ease of doing business, how it affects investment flows into the country, and how it affects, our general well-being. So I've talked about the judiciary and the judges. I'll also talk about the lawyers themselves. The way lawyers are comporting themselves nowadays sometimes is very, very disheartening. So you see a situation where, and recently we even had a case like that, where lawyers who are supposed to do things, in trust, who have that fiduciary relationship of trust and confidence on their clients, go on to sometimes forge papers, go on to sell properties belonging to their clients without their clients' permission, go on to take money from, all sorts of situations. And so that's why we put this webinar together as the first of a many series to see how we can help to root out some of these challenges in our justice system. Now I've talked about the lawyers, and let me talk about Nigerians, vulnerable Nigerians. A lot of Nigerians do not have access to justice. A lot of average Nigerians cannot afford to go to court, cannot afford, if something wrong happens to them, they have no recourse. Literally, if they are poor, they cannot afford legal services. And so, you hear about people dying unlawfully. You hear about people standing on the road, waiting for a taxi, standing on the road selling something, and then a truck comes and crushes you, a truck from a big company, or a tanker will fall on you. And that's it. You just die for nothing. You go to a hospital, to give birth, or you go to a hospital to do something. Before you know it, something happens, you lose your life, or you lose the life of your loved one or your child. Negligence, medical negligence, and nothing happens. No lawyer, nobody thinks about going to sue the hospital. We have things like class actions that happen in other parts of the world. We have public interest cases. We have cases of negligence. We have wrongful, and that's part of what Metu is going to talk about when he comes on, because Metu is a lawyer in the US and is very, very passionate about these issues, So we need to be more active as citizens. We need to be active citizens, but most importantly, as lawyers. As lawyers, we have a role to play. We are custodians of the conscience, of the nation. We custodians. We are the justice system is the last hope for the common man. And I believe that we've abdicated our responsibility as lawyers. And this is a strong call to action for not only lawyers, but people from the civil society organizations. I know we have the Hope Beyond Bars here. You know, a lot of people are rotting in jail. People who cannot afford legal representation, people who are awaiting trial. So many people are rotting in jail right now. Some people are, wrongfully accused. We've seen people who were held up just because they were loitering. We've had a lot of cases that we've paid fines for people. We've been doing that since 2018. So there's so many challenges, overcrowded prisons, we need an overhaul of our justice system. And so we're beginning this advocacy, although our Access to Justice initiative has been on since 2018, but we've decided that we need to turbocharge it. We need to make it a greater call and a more collaborative effort with other stakeholders. And the stakeholders include the lawyers, the Nigerian Bar Association, the legal community, the judiciary, and so on and so forth. So that's why we're here. We look forward to a fruitful conversation. We want to have a report after this meeting. So please, each and every one of you, feel free to comment. We'll have a Q&A, very interactive session where you can unmute and speak about your experience, about your suggestions, and what you think that can be done to salvage the situation. And so we want this to be very, very interactive, on the chat box and also with the Q&A session. So thank you all so much. And I'm so glad to be here. Back to you, moderator.
Oh, thank you so much, Ms. Chinenye. That was it was very interesting listening to you, and I could actually see the passion you have for humanity. I see the passion you have for humanitarian activities, and we applaud you for that. So I am not actually the moderator for this webinar, so please permit me to bring on the moderator who will introduce our speakers and then proceed into the conversation proper. So please put your hands together, your virtual hands together, as we welcome Chinedu Albert. Albert is a senior associate here at the FEMA Advisory, and he will be doing justice to the interactions with the speakers. So Albert, you are welcome. Please just go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Esther. I hope everyone can hear me. Good evening from Nigeria and welcome to this very important webinar. It is very important because it is a serious conversation, and I will not waste anyone's time reeling the data. The data is out there. I saw in a recent report that there are over 1 million cases pending in court right now, and visualize that in terms of bodies of people in our detention facilities. So with over 1 million cases pending in court, you have over 1 million people probably awaiting trial in court. A lot of them have been remanded pending a trial, and nothing is moving. There are about 75% of prisoners according to a recent report, are awaiting trial. So the data is dire. It is visibly audible to the deaf in Nigeria that there are so many cases of human rights infraction. But we have a singular issue. We have a singular purpose for this webinar. And our goal is to talk solutions. We are here to explore some themes essential to advancing the cause of justice in Nigeria. Themes such as stakeholder collaboration, how to leverage technology to access justice and give justice. So these are some of the themes that will be recurring in our conversation. And without wasting further time, I want to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Oluwafunke Adeoye. The way this conversation will be structured, I will ask questions and she will answer. I am aware that she has to leave very soon, so we are not going to take a lot of time. Funke Adeoye is a human rights defender. a social innovator, and a young global leader. She is the founder and executive director of Hope Behind Bars Africa, an organization that promotes human rights and criminal justice reforms using legal aid, advocacy, and technology. She has consulted for Cornell University, the World Justice Project, Accountability Lab, and several others. Now, to know more about Miss Adoye, Oluwafunke Adoye, you can quickly check her up on Google or LinkedIn. But I want to just go to the conversation and ask Miss Adoye some questions. So if Miss Adoye could unmute herself, I have a number of questions to ask. And like Ms. Chinenye said, I want this to be interactive. So in the course of the conversation, if you get a light bulb idea, please put down your questions or comments on the chat box. My team will be available to take down your comments or questions, and we will get to them as soon as possible. All right. So for Mr. Adoye, good evening, madam. Please, if you're here, could you unmute yourself and give a very brief introduction? Tell us who you are, a part of yourself that a part of your profile I did not cover.
All right, thank you very much, Chinedu. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
All right, good evening, everyone from Nigeria, and I would say good morning to those that are calling in from the US. Thank you for having me on this discussion. I mean, where do I start from? Okay, so first off, I have to leave early. I know the time was changed at the last minute, and I had some other engagements. So I'll just try and share as much as possible before I leave. So I think you very well put it. I'm a lawyer. I'm the founder of Hope Behind Bars Africa. What else? I'm very passionate about justice issues in Nigeria. So when Ms. Chinenye was talking, I could feel her passion as well. It's something that many of us are keen on. When we went to study law, we saw law as a tool for social engineering, and we expected that, as lawyers, when you come out, you'll be by virtue of your work, people's life will be saved, you'll be helping people and all of that. But a situation whereby our institutions don't even give you the platform to do the work well, it's really challenging. So I'm looking forward to the conversation for the short time I'm going to be here, and I'm really hoping that a lot of the conversation, I mean, we know the problems. You already rightly mentioned some of the data. I'm hoping that a lot of the conversation will be around solutions, low-hanging fruits, what are the little things that we can do to make things better. So yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Adoye. In the short time you're going to spend with us, we would ensure that we ask the key questions. And please, you can keep your responses within 2-3 minutes so that we'll cover as much as possible. All right, so my first question to you is, reflecting on your experience being the founder of Hope Behind Bars, what role do you think that advocacy campaigns and organizations advocating for criminal justice reforms can play in driving policy changes within the judicial system or the justice system? And how can CSOs mobilize more effectively around key issues affecting access to justice? Basically, what is the role CSOs? What are those roles that CSOs can play in ensuring that because this conversation, access to justice is a multi-stakeholder issue, but how can CSOs come together to mobilize and ensure ensure that justice is done in this area?
All right, thank you. So I would say that, like you rightly said, justice issues are issues that require like a multi-pronged approach, and CSOs have a very key role to play. Everybody has something to do, but CSOs have a very key role to play. And I'm going to respond to that, just looking at the work that we have been able to do over time. Now, CSOs are like they are the arm of government that they are the arm that checks and balances what the government is doing or what other sectors are doing. And so that means that in their hands are tools for monitoring and evaluation. Mostly in their hands are tools for data, evidence that we can use to monitor the pace of justice. So while the judiciary is supposed to enforce the law, the executive is supposed to make the law, CSOs mostly are able to share if the law is actually working or if the system is actually working. And let me give an example from something that happened recently. I know some of you must have seen the news with respect to the End Bad Governance protest. So one of the things my organization was one of the key advocacy organizations that worked on getting out the minors from incarceration. We have actually been representing them since August and making a lot of noise, right? In our mind, making a lot of noise and just creating a lot of awareness around the violations. We had lawyers that we're working with now, even though we predominantly, 80% of our team are lawyers, we still needed to work with lawyers. Now, the lawyers could not do most of the advocacy work. Theirs was to go to court, file their proceedings, represent the client. Ours was to create awareness and engage the IGP and all the other arms of government that were involved. So I would say, in summary, that CSOs have a major role to play, major role in terms of monitoring the effectiveness of the process, monitoring, evaluating if the process is actually working, looking at the baseline, where we are coming from to where we are and where we want to go to. And then finally, in terms of data as well, because one of the major challenges we have as a country is that we don't have sufficient data. We know these problems are a lot, but we don't have solid data. Like if you tell anyone that is not a lawyer now that what's the data around recidivism or data around awaiting trial in it, they probably don't even know where to go and find it because there is actually nowhere to get it, right? So I think also in terms of getting the data, because data is what we need to implement solutions that would actually work. So yeah, that's my quick response to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Adeoye. You said one profound thing that I would like to reiterate. You said that CSOs are that arm. Usually people say the media is a fourth arm of government, but you were saying, and I'm going to adopt yours now, that CSOs are the fourth arm of government that keeps other arms of government accountable and on their toes to ensure that they do their job. Now, thank you for mentioning the hashtag End Bad Governance protest. I am aware that your organization is behind advocating for some of those minors. Now, for the interest of the people on this webinar who may not be following the news, could you shed light on that issue? And from the standpoint of what should be, how should that case be approached that is not being followed? So what is the due procedure that should be followed in handling that case that has been ignored? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, the case I was referring to is the case of the minors that went viral last week, if we saw the news. So, a quick backstory. In August, a couple of Nigerians went to the street and were protesting against bad governance, and over 1,000 of them were picked up across the country. In Abuja specifically, about 140, if I'm not mistaken, were picked up in Abuja and other parts of the country. So that's the first thing. The fact that the AGF, the Inspector General of Police actually brought people from different states to try them in Abuja. So when we talk about the weakness of our institutions, that's something to look at. The fact that, they were tried for different charges. Some of them, treason, terrorism, all of these are charges that carry the capital offense. Now, a remand order was granted against these protesters. About 30 of them were minors. Now, a remand order for 60 days was granted. They were remanded for 60 days. Post 60 days, they were not charged. They were not arraigned. So we had to keep engaging. We and the law firm of Femi Falana and Deji Adeyanju, we had to keep engaging to say, you need to charge these people if you have something against them. After the engagement did not work, we had to file a fundamental human rights action. So we filed a fundamental human rights action, and that was what led the government to bring the minors to court last week to charge them proper. They were arrested 2nd of August, but they were arraigned on the 27th or thereabout, last week Friday. And it was after they were arraigned that Nigerians saw how bad things were, how they looked malnourished, how they looked starved. These minors were not in a correctional facility, by the way. They were in a police detention. It's called IRC here in Abuja. So, I mean, there's just been a plethora of violations that have taken place. There is the conversation around the fact that these minors are minors and should have been through the child justice system if at all a crime had been committed. But thankfully, the president, which again is also another justice problem if we follow that story, the president gave a directive saying the minors should be the case against the minors should be discharged. That's another justice problem because the president had no business giving such directive. We went to court on Monday this week, and then the AGF, was in court, and he asked that the matter be discontinued, and the charge was struck out. And I think about 119 of them were freed. We have about 11 of them left. Now, for us, I mean, it's a little win because yes, the protesters are released, but we still have other protesters across the country who are still being tried for one trumped up charge or the other. And if we remember our constitutional law very well, we all have a right to peaceful assembly, right? We all have a right to protest peacefully. A lot of these people were actually protesting peacefully. The government came with chopped up charges. So that's the case. I mean, I hear Chinenye did mention that this is going to be an ongoing conversation. So I'm hoping that some of the things I highlighted in this case will be something to look out for, because when we look at access to justice as a whole, we also have to look at judicial integrity. Why should a sitting president be giving orders to a sitting court, and then we're all rejoicing? We're all rejoicing because it looks like a low-hanging fruit, but in actual sense, it looks as though we're in a dictatorship. The president can wake up any day and make, directives as he likes to the judge. But I don't know if I answered your question, but that's a little overview of what the case was about.
Thank you, Ms. Ado. You did more than justice to the issue, and you also brought up a question. You brought up a point that is part of a question I have written down for you. So let's talk judicial integrity. We've had so many cases of executive interference in the judiciary. There is a reason we have a constitution and we have the roles and duties of the various arms of government. So more than what is written on paper in terms of the powers of the various arms of government, we know that in practice, there is always interference. So in terms of policy, what changes do you think we need to make, and what implementation strategy do you think we need to put in place to ensure that our judiciary, which is the last hope of the common man, is preserved, the interference is reduced to its barest minimum, if at all, and justice is available to everyone, despite whether your case goes viral on Twitter, whether you are rich or poor?
Yeah, so that's a very great question, and I don't know if we can exhaust that question in the next few minutes. So I'm going to start from the last thing you mentioned, because that's something that my organization is passionate about, and I know that a lot of organizations are doing some work around it. The fact that, as it is in Nigeria, if you're poor, you would most likely not get justice. If a poor man comes in contact with the justice system, there is most likelihood that he would not get justice. It's different when it's a rich man. And I think that's where we need to get to as a country, where everybody, the child of nobody, the child of anybody, can engage the system and believe that to some extent they will get justice. How do we go about that? I'm not going to tell you that I have all the answers, right? It would start, first of all, by understanding the inherent dignity of every human, that every human has inherent dignity, irrespective of whether they are poor, whether they are rich. And that is an ethos that needs to go in. I mean, during our training as lawyers, I think human dignity was something that was very clear, but in practice, it's not something that, we see. So I would say that one of the things that we can do, low-hanging fruit again, is enforcing accountability. I feel like, or I do know that a lot of the challenges that we face in our justice system is because of that lack of consequence. You look at even from the police, a couple of years back, we were crying about NSAS. Police is also part of the justice system, so that's why I'm referring to them. We're talking about NSAS, and one of the asks was we need to hold the police accountable. Can we get back to the point of holding the judiciary accountable when it is obvious that somebody has veered away from the right course? Can the person be held accountable? I'm going to give another example based on this protest issue that happened. I don't know if how many of us know or how many of us remember that just before the protest, some governors were able to get certain judges to grant ex parte orders restricting protesters to a particular place. It happened in Lagos, it happened in Abuja, and it happened in Ogun State and Kwara, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I was privy to the order, to the motion that was filed in Abuja. I was privy to the motion requesting for protesters to stay in the MKO Abiola Stadium. And if you see that motion, everything about the motion will make you question the years you spent in law school. From the fact that the wrong parties, the motion was directed at the wrong parties, to the fact that the orders the motion was taking was not clear. Everything was, it was just done in a way that you just be wondering what happened to your legal profession. And then when we read the order of the court, even the order of the court was extremely questionable. Currently, that motion is being challenged in court by Inebehi and a couple of other organizations. We're working with that as well. And my point is, eventually that motion will be thrown out. I mean, it's good as useless now, because what they wanted to achieve was to grant the order restricting protesters to a particular location, which was achieved through the arm of the judiciary. But to say that eventually when this matter that we brought in court challenging that motion, when we get the order, because I know we are going to, can such judges be held accountable in line with the provisions of the National Judicial Council? Can we hold them accountable? Another thing will be to say we need to strengthen the judiciary as much as possible. I don't know if we have Chatham House rule here, and I don't know how much we are allowed to say this is a safe space, but I want most of us to look at what is currently going on, again, in FCT, and the current Minister of FCT, yes, the Minister of FCT. You'll find a lot of statements he's making. I mean, we did a full report on some of the things that he has done that just shows that the judiciary in some way is favorably disposed to him. Now, with all this information that is out there, how are we holding those judges accountable? How are we holding even the executive accountable? Then finally to say, when you were reading my profile, for us, we believe that technology is a major tool that can help ease the work in the justice system. Now, when you go through the ropes, you find that we have issues with delay, we have issues with judges still having to type in longhand and all of that. In this day and age, there's no reason why a judge should be typing with longhand. We're talking AI here. We're talking easy machineries that can be used to transcribe text to speech or speech to text. So I would say finally that we need to go back to the drawing board and see how we can leverage technology to address some of the issues that we're facing in our justice system. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adoye. You've given wonderful recommendations, and I know that the time you promised you told us you have to leave is here, but one more question, and you keep preempting me, and in a good way. I love that, because the next question I wanted to ask was technology, and this is my final question. You've mentioned some emerging technologies which can be leveraged in the carriage of justice. Yes, that is good. But can you give us like specific examples of digital platforms that can help improve access to justice? And more importantly, how can these platforms be scaled up to get to the federating states, not just Lagos and Abuja? How can we scale these platforms to be accessible to everyone?
Okay, just to piggyback on that question as well, you also mentioned something very important, which is that we all know the problems. We've known this problem for decades. How can we, do things differently? That's like the question I'll ask now. What can we do differently that we haven't done before? And what can we do as, sometimes the government has to do this, but, policy making also emanates from a critical mass of people too as well. And as lawyers, as people who are in the civil society space, we can come together to create that critical mass, right? So what do you think we can do differently to move the needle?
All right, thank you. So let me start from your question, Chinenye, and then I'll go to the question around technology. I would say that, again, I am one person that I usually don't like to dwell so much on the problems, right? I do believe that there are certain low-hanging fruits that we can achieve. And the truth is that when we look at the problems within the past couple of years, there are certain wins, there are certain little wins. I'm going to give you an example. 5 years ago, actually, we didn't have anything like digitization of the court system. But as I speak to you, I do know that there are certain places, there are certain states that have begun to digitize their court processes. So yes, the problem is a lot. We cannot see everything as a whole, but there are little wins. Now, one of the things that I know has worked is collaboration, which is why I'm glad we're having this conversation, even though I wish there were other stakeholders here as well. So it's not just like we're speaking to the gallery. So there is SEMA Advisory as a law firm. There is Hope Behind Bars as CSOs. We have the donor organizations, then we have the government, we have the judiciary, we have the different stakeholders in a room. And we all know the problem. How do we begin to solve this problem? How can each stakeholder look at what their strengths are, and then they are able to bring their strengths to the table? I gave an example with what happened with the End Bad Governance protesters. If it was just us handling that case, probably we will not be here today. To some extent, do you know that even we had some, the fact that we had some, I like to call them emerging allies, someone like VDM, as much as I have my strong reservations for him, but, you know, those little influence that these people, like from different spaces, new allies are able to bring to the table, it makes a lot of difference as well. To say what is our various strengths and how can we maximize our strengths. In the area of access to justice now, for instance, talking about technology, during the protest again, we had, and just to say this, when I talk about technology, I'm not even thinking of, there is room for AI, there's room for blockchain, there's room for all of that. But we are talking about a group of people in Nigeria. Many people, there are certain people who don't even have access to smartphones. So what are those little things? We had a toll-free line during the protest. And sorry, I have to just keep going back to what worked for us. We had a toll-free line, and we got over 500 calls on the toll-free line. The toll-free line was basically to say, if you need a lawyer, call this line. Now, we are also strongly aware of the fact that it's possible there are certain people that would have loved to call the number, but they never knew about it. Why? Because we only publicize the toll-free line on social media. So how do we reach people in rural areas who don't have access to social media? That's where grassroots organization comes in. The truth is, I don't think we can solve this problem by sitting in Abuja and Lagos alone. If we do, we would have an Abuja and Lagos where the justice system is working, and then we have these other states where there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So this, for me, is something that takes everybody coming to the table and saying, what do I have to offer? What are my strengths? For FEMA, it might be that, okay, we'll bring the public sector, private sector. You see, that conversation about private sector is a conversation that we need to have. We need to go back to it in such a manner that we know that in most of the countries that work, it's the private sector. So you leave it for the government will take it as a civil service thing. You leave it for CSOs. I mean, ours is advocacy. Ours is, CSOs, we have all our interests and all, but then you bring the private sector, who, yes, might be looking at profits, but they are also able to get things done. So I would say that what we can do differently is look at emerging allies, other people that we've not brought to the table. Let's bring them to the table and have this conversation. Let's bring them, let's hear what each person's strength is, and let's pull our strengths together. And then to say finally, Chinedu, to your question around technology again, leveraging technology, I know that there are organizations that have AI tools where people don't need to talk to a lawyer. They can engage the AI tool rather, you get response to their question, and then they are empowered in such a way. It's how do we take this to the grassroots? How can it be a simple text so that somebody who doesn't have a smartphone can just text 123 to a number and then he's able to get, answers to his legal questions and whatnot. It's a lot to say, but I'm glad that, like you said, this is an ongoing conversation, and hopefully we would be able to find answers to our questions. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Ms. Adoye. You've been your recommendations have been insightful and also unconventional. You've mentioned some recommendations that I think we should think more deeply about. For example, using allies, unconventional allies that a lot of people may not like. Very Darkman, for example, is a very controversial figure, but we find that allies like him are very important in the conversation around access to justice. And in the area of technology, you also mentioned something unconventional, using USSD, SMS, and all those methods for people who are not people who do not have smartphones. Thankfully, smartphone penetration in Nigeria is on the increase. Nevertheless, there are so many Nigerians who do not have smartphone yet. And we need bright minds like yourself to think through the solutions to this. Access to justice should be for every Nigerian, whether you have a smartphone or not. So thank you, Miss Adoye. Thank you so much. We are very grateful that you took our time to grace.
I even want to just say, like, you're doing exceptional work in a country where a lot of people are jaded. You and your team, Hope Behind Bars, thank you for continuing to carry that flag. And also being a woman as well, because I know that a lot of women, you know, are actually at the forefront when it comes to nation building. So I'm really proud of you as a fellow woman. Please keep up the good work and let's find ways to synergize. Now, like we said, this is our Access to Justice 2.0. We want to do more. We want to make impact at scale. And so we'll be calling on you also. And please call on us as well when you're, you know, doing these programs where we're available to support, mobilize lawyers to represent people to do the advocacy work and taking it to the grassroots, you know, on that. We've launched halls initiative and we've been able to really galvanize a lot of momentum for that. So there's a lot that needs to be done, but nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. So thank you so much, and we will continue to call on you as this campaign goes on.
All right.
So back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Chinenye, all the way from San Francisco. You're looking great.
Not San Francisco now. I'm now in Los Angeles.
Oh wow, nice.
But I'm still in California. Yes.
Awesome. So our time is far and well spent, and I would like to bring up our next speaker, Mr. Matthew Ogike, who is, although Nigerian, but he practices outside of jurisdiction. He practices in the United States. He's an experienced trial attorney based in Los Angeles, California. His practice is primarily focused on civil litigation with a particular emphasis on labor and employment disputes, housing issues, and civil rights cases. Over the course of his career, Mr. Ogike has developed a reputation as a tenacious and skilled litigator, having successfully represented both individual and corporate clients. I will stop there. If there is an important part of his profile that he wants us to know, I will let him unmute and tell us about that. It's very important that we have that perspective. We have people on ground, we have people whose boots are down here, but it's also important that we have perspective as to how things can be, how things can work. That is why we curated this and reached out to Mr. Ogike. So, Mr. Ogike, could you kindly unmute yourself and give us a 40-second introduction of yourself, if I missed anything?
All right. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
All right. Thank you. So there isn't much you missed in your introduction, and I plan to be very brief in my responses. I'm a trial lawyer based here in Los Angeles. I do a lot of civil trials and do a lot of work in civil litigation, with just a little criminal work that I do. But I'm a trial lawyer. I've been practicing since 2004 here in Los Angeles. But I'm raised in Nigeria. Did my secondary school in Nigeria. Did my some college, some university in Nigeria before I came back out to Los Angeles. So I'm very glad to be here to do a lot of listening. I do frequently come to Nigeria. I'm very in tune with Nigeria. I traveled there. I was there in September. I was in Abuja in September. So I'm very in tune with what is happening. And I would like to say a lot of congratulate Ms. Funke Adeoye. It's inspiring what she's doing. It's inspiring to see the kind of work that she does and many people do. But I'm here to be part of this conversation, and you can fire away. I can help. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I want to especially thank you for giving us your time. We know you're a very busy man, but you've taken out time from your schedule to talk to us, and we're all grateful here at the Femme Advisory, and the other Nigerian, but you're practicing in the United States. I want you to dig deep into memory lane when you were Nigerian, and juxtapose it to your practice currently in Los Angeles. During our introduction, you were not here, but we gave some data. There are about 1 million cases that are pending in our Nigerian courts, perhaps more, because Ms. Adoye talked about how our data is not accurate, how there is only so much data out there. So it is right to conclude that there are possibly more than 1 million pending cases in our courts right now. So what innovative approaches do you think we can adopt in Nigeria to reduce case backlogs in our courts? And also, we know that access to justice justice here is not just criminal justice, but civil, including civil justice. When Ms. Chinua was talking earlier, she talked about how investors shun Nigeria because they are not able to have recourse in the event that something happens to the investment. That is civil justice and all. So it's losing us investments and all. So both criminal and civil justice, how do you think we can decongest our dockets?
Yeah,
and
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Let me start with the criminal, and I will speak practically and bring in my experiences. So we're here in Los Angeles, here in California, and I'm sure in most states in the United States, access to justice is very much important when you have a criminal defendant. And of course, it makes sense because if you have a criminal defendant, the consequences of them being convicted is dire, right? It's either you're facing, if it's a capital punishment, if that's not the case, then you are being denied your freedom if you're going to be incarcerated, right? So what happens is, first of all, when you look at it from the point of view of access to justice, you have a public defender's office that everybody has access to, and that is funded by the state. You go in there, the public defender's office makes a determination of what your financial background is, and if you qualify, then you are immediately assigned a qualified lawyer. So when you have a prosecutor's office, and then you also have a public defender's office. So that gives immediate access to justice for whoever the criminal defendant is, and no matter what their financial background is. I don't know what obtains in Nigeria, but something like that
legal aid counsel.
Yeah, okay, yeah, a legal aid counsel, that could help. But the truth of the matter is that those offices have to be funded. They have to be funded by the state, and also can be funded by private individuals who have the resources, right? So that's the criminal aspect of it. Now, in civil, there are a lot of private individuals and private companies and not-for-profit organizations that provide access to justice for many litigants. Okay, so when I first started practicing, I was attached to a not-for-profit group that did a lot of work for low-income citizens who had housing issues. So what would happen was, if they didn't have any resources to go to court, if they weren't able to afford a lawyer, they would apply to these legal aid organizations. And this legal aid organization would make a determination as to what their financial status was, and then reach out to someone like me and pay their fees. Now, they're spread all over the sector. They're spread all over the city. I don't know if these kind of organizations are present in Nigeria, but those are things that people have to look at establishing. We're talking about solutions. If you have citizens who do not have access to justice, who do not have access to lawyers, who do not have access to court, then to an extent, you're going to have or you're going to have difficulty in moving your system forward. So when we talk about practical solutions, everybody has to come together and put in that effort to create these organizations or fund these organizations that reach out to low income litigants. Now, another thing I want to say is this: knowledge is also important. Spread all over where I practice. There are law libraries, public law libraries that people can access. They access it, and you have people who can help them do a little research here and there about what the issues are. Now, these law libraries are publicly funded, they are free, and they are very resourceful. So these are some practical solutions that I can think of that, and I don't know that they're too difficult to implement. All it takes is some kind of commitment to doing these things, and you can begin to work on and improve your access to justice. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Metal. Now, your last point kind of shared, it was preemptive because I wanted to ask something relating to that. Now, it's about education, legal education. When we find issues on human rights, when issues on human rights go viral, and you find comments on social media that are deep in extreme ignorance, oftentimes these comments come with so much confidence that you may, if you didn't know the law, you may be inclined to agree with them. How do we structure our legal education in Nigeria to ensure that not only do people know their rights, but more people come in contact with what our laws are in terms of procedure, in terms of the substantive law? So how can we restructure legal education in Nigeria, not just for lawyers, but for the everyday Nigerian?
And I think that's where two things come in mind. First, I've talked about public libraries, public law libraries. Those have to be established, and people have to be told that these places do exist. Secondly, technology. Like I know you made a comment about the fact that people are having more access to phones, to cell phones and Androids and all that. You can also you have to establish these tools and let people know that these tools do exist, right? Because if you don't let people know that they exist, they will not know. They will not know. So I think I don't know how your legal the law schools are set up. I didn't go to law school in Nigeria. I don't know what the curriculum is and how a law is taught. But I think that I will focus on the law libraries. And most times the location of these law libraries is also very important. Most times you have them located right next to the courts. So when people have to go to courts, they come back and you're pointed to the law library and you're told you have free access to it. It is funded. And from there, even in the law library, you can now have all the legal groups hosted in those law libraries, all the not-for-profit groups hosted in those law libraries. But again, funding is important, right? Because I just listened to Funke telling Chineye that you can't only do the work in Abuja and Lagos. Now, Nigeria is vast, right? So if you're going to have anybody travel travel throughout Nigeria and try to create awareness, funding is very important. So there are a lot of rich people in Nigeria. They're looking for what to do with their money. Don't just be throwing the money up on social media. Fund some legal groups, fund some not-for-profit organizations, fund some law libraries. Go out to the rural areas, give them some funding, and let people know that they can actually resolve their disputes through your courts. And it's also very disappointing. It's really disappointing when you talk about the backlog in the court system. If you're going to wait 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, in the case of the minors that were just arraigned, 90 days for children on criminal charges, it's that is a deep problem, and it has to be resolved. So going back to your question, funding, and awareness is what you need, and it can be done. It just takes the commitment. It just takes the commitment to do it, and that's what I find in the jurisdictions where I practice. People are committed to making justice work. People are committed in making sure that access to justice trickles down to even the most vulnerable. So when you have that commitment, that is 90% of the work done. Remember, for most of you who are lawyers, appearance is 90% of any case, right? I think that when it comes to access to justice, commitment is 90% of the work.
Those are quite profound recommendations. Funding, I align with your view as well. We need people to be committed to the goal of access to justice, to fund initiatives, set up public libraries for people. You don't want to know the state of our libraries in Nigeria. It's quite pitiable, but it's fine. We'll get there. Now, this next question, Mr. Adoye and I talked about it, but I wanted to bring in a foreign perspective. It's about judicial integrity. Now, more than the letters of the law, what we find in practice is the opposite of it. We all often find the judiciary compromised in one way or the other by the various stakeholders around, either by the executive or members of the legislature with overwhelming charisma that are charismatic and all. The effect of that is justice becomes selective. Persons who do not have this access to these people do not get justice. From your practice, in your years of experience, I want us to talk solution. How do you think we can restructure our governance, our institutions, to ensure independence of the judiciary, to ensure that our justice is preserved and no longer selective?
Yes, and I'll be very brief on that. I think that first of all, the Bar Association has a lot of work to do, because if you have a judiciary that's compromised, then lawyers who are practicing within the bar they suffer a lot. You know, their practices suffer when they go to advocate for their clients. You're not advocating in front of judges who are neutral, and that can be devastating. And again, the optics, sometimes when I'm, follow some of the news coming out of Nigeria, the optics of you having members of the executive going and commissioning homes for judges, and you have the judges sitting in there, and the optics alone, it doesn't look right. So I think it starts, the major work starts with the Bar Association, looking for solutions, looking for a way. Like out here where I practice, there are judicial commissions who work with the Bar Associations, and they're continuously meeting to make sure that rules are strengthened. Existing rules are strengthened to make sure that there's no that judges are not compromised. Okay, and that is continuing work that you have to do. What is the legislation? What is the Bar Association saying about legislation when it comes to the independence of the judiciary? Right. Most of the work has to come from the Bar Association, because the Bar Association is the primary consumer of the judiciary, and through them, the work of the judiciary now goes down to the public. Again, the Nigerian Bar Association has to look at that very critically. Look at local solutions, because I'm out here. Most solutions are local. So most problems are local. So most solutions will be local. But the way for me to answer your question is, I think that the initial point of addressing that problem has to be a serious insight from the Bar Association to make sure that there is a true independence of the judiciary and the executive, and also the legislature. But I think the Bar Association has a lot of work to do there.
Thank you so much for that insight, Mr. Ogike. Now, my last question to you is about collaboration. A theme of this conversation is stakeholder collaboration. And the stakeholders we've identified are not just the police, the judiciary, the other arms of government, but it's also about international partners and Nigeria's diaspora, like yourself. So, how do you think? What are your suggestions, or what solutions do you have towards building international partnerships with local stakeholders here to enhance access to justice in Nigeria? Maybe by way of capacity building, by way of support, in whatever way or form. But what solutions do you have towards structuring a partnership between the local stakeholders here on ground and international players?
I think one thing to do, and I sometimes I hate to speak without fully knowing studying what the problem is. But I think that's where people like us start, or people like me start. I know the FEMA advisory. I know Chinenye. I've talked to Chinenye for years, and her passion for change and innovation amazes me. I don't know where she and her team get that passion, especially working in an environment like Nigeria, where it seems every day that when young people are working hard to make changes, the establishment continues to stand down. And I don't know that most people like me will have the discipline to continue to work. But I think, to answer your question, partnering with people like the FEMA advisory, coming down local, visiting the courts, visiting the prison systems, seeing what is happening, will allow us to now profile complete solutions, not just solutions on theory, not just solutions on what we're hearing people say or what we're hearing on the news, but for us to profile real solutions, there has to be a commitment on our side. And that involves coming down locally and actually seeing these problems firsthand, then putting in our 1 cent or 1 kobo, however you want to do it, and seeing if we can make a change. But I think that most international partners can't just sit down on Zoom, sit down in Los Angeles, sit down in London, and just like, again, like Funke said, sit down in Abuja or Lagos to solve the problem. We have to localize our efforts. Our commitment has to be there. We have to fully understand the problem, then give the solutions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Metsogike. We are really grateful for your time, for how much passion you've shown in answering our questions and also keeping to time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Those are all the questions we have.
Can we see if there are any questions for Mr. Metz, if anyone has any questions or comments? We forgot to do that for the last speaker. And then also we were told that some of the technical people are having issues joining with the link. So one of our speakers, Justice Anukam, she has tried for over an hour to join, but been a challenge there. So do we have any questions, comments, any comments or questions before we wrap up the webinar? Thank you. Mr. Moderator, you can take your comments. Oh, wow. Justice Anukam was able to join. I didn't know. Wow. I guess you have to use another device. You're muted. We can't hear you. The audio is not connected. Albert, Justice Anukam is here. Please,
please, if you're here, Her Ladyship, could you kindly unmute yourself? So I'm told that Honorable Justice Stella Anukam is on a call. And if Her Ladyship is on a call, as I've been told, I would love for you to unmute yourself. And while she's doing that, let me quickly read the profile on Her Ladyship. Honorable Justice Stella Anukam is a judge of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. She has over 32 years of experience. She has served in several government capacities in Nigeria before joining the African Court. Before that, she was the Director of International and Comparative Law at the Federal Ministry of Justice in Nigeria. and she supervised human rights and related matters, preparation and compliance with the state reporting obligations to Human Rights Treaty. And with all that, you can see that she has a robust knowledge of human rights, both human rights infractions and human rights procedure. So if her leadership is on the call, we'll be most honored to have her unmute herself and speak to us.
Yeah, we are having an issue with the audio. Sorry, Justice Anukam, I don't know if we can what do we do now? I'm not
Okay, yes, we can hear you. We are not able to hear you.
That's the thing. We can see her. I think they didn't connect to the audio. You know, there's a setting to be able to connect to the audio of the device. Probably that's what it is. Okay, maybe mute and on. It's not working. What do we do now?
So at the top left of your phone, of your device, you would see a speaker symbol, is a speaker icon. If you click on that, it will direct you on how to turn on the sound. Preferably, you can have someone help do that for you. All right. So, as was mentioned at the start of this webinar, this is a series, and we are going to have, more of this. So, because of the technical difficulties we are having, we would encourage our audience to leave questions on the chat box, and any of the panelists can answer those questions while Justice Anukam fixes the issue, her audio issue. And if she's unable to do that, we're going to take her on the second edition of this webinar. So if there are any questions, comments, concerns, kindly put it on the chat box and we will take them. All right. In the absence of that, I will yield the microphone to Chinenye Wanaka, the managing partner of the FEMA Advisory, to give us a closing remark. We promise to keep to time, and this is 5:35 p.m. West African time. Thank you.
All right. I about some of these technical challenges. I'm still trying to see if Justice Anukam can maybe salvage the situation. But if not, we promise to have another edition where we'll be able to, this time we'll be with her in person. So it will be easier for us to navigate technical change. I'm so grateful that you made out time today. You're very, very busy. And for you to be able to give us your time, we, the younger generation, we benefit from the insights, the knowledge of the older generation. We believe that there's need to have that generational collaboration. Nation building is a must, not a sprint. And for us to build our nation, Nigeria, we have to have very strong institutions. And one of the strongest institutions is the justice sector, the judiciary, we, the lawyers, the police, the EFCC, Legal Aid Council, Human Rights Commission, so many stakeholders. In fact, we have a courtesy visit to the head of the Executive Secretary of the Human Rights Commission next week. And we're hoping to take some of the recommendations and the findings from this webinar, as a tool, because, like the previous speaker mentioned, you are not here, but she's the founder of Hope Beyond Bars, and they were part of the organizations that helped to represent
even the minors that were arrested during the last protests. And so as we try to build stronger institutions in Nigeria, as we try to help with this situation where people, especially young people, are feeling hopeless about the situation, we need all hands on deck. Because one person cannot do it, two people cannot do it. It needs to be a critical mass. And so there are a couple of things we want to do with the Access to Justice Initiative. One, we want to launch a mentorship series. And this mentorship series will call on lawyers both within the country and outside the country. So Meto Gike is one of the people who will be part of that process. People in our network who know how things ought to be done, in the sense that who have practiced in certain systems or jurisdictions that at least work better, so that we can mentor the next generation of lawyers on things like public interest law, human rights law, advocacy, and even what the role of the various institutions are supposed to be doing. Some people don't even know where the executive starts and ends, where the judiciary starts and ends, and where the legislative arm of government starts and ends. So we don't have proper separation of powers. Sometimes, like Funke mentioned, you have the judiciary kind of like bending to the executive, or the perception of lack of independence. So there's so much that needs to be done. We also talked about the private sector, why nations fail, why the nations experience this economic stagnation. It's because the levers, foundations, the pillars of the society are not in place, are not strong. Apologies, I think the network kicked me out. So basically that's why we're here. And like we said, it's going to be an ongoing conversation. We will call on all the people who have been able to participate today with your recommendations and how we can just move the needle. It's a continuous effort, continuous exercise. Before the end of the year, we hope to have a prison outreach. We always have prison outreaches a few times a year where we go and pay fines for inmates who cannot afford it, especially those who committed light offenses. So some of them are in prison for just loitering. Some of them are in prison for very minor offenses, and they don't have 10,000 naira, 15,000 naira to be able to pay for their fines. So they end up languishing in jail. So for the past 7 years now, we've been paying fines for pre-trial detainees and those who are wrongfully accused, and also those who committed light offenses. Another big part of it is being able to mentor them and reintegrate them back into society so that they don't go back and commit those crimes again. So we have our work cut out for us. Another big thing we mentioned on this webinar is the need to have technology innovation. Our courts are not going to function efficiently if we don't have the right tools, if judges don't have the right tools to work. Also, I know that remuneration of judges is also a big thing that has been complained about in the past, and the fact that sometimes our courts are overcrowded. So sometimes we need to really restructure our court system where we have special courts for certain matters. Not every matter needs to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and just basically have the reforms that we need. It's not just about elections. Election petitions, because they are time bound, they tend to be what a lot of our big lawyers go after, our senior advocates. But beyond election petitions, we need to make sure that other parts of the justice system work efficiently and in a timely manner. So I want to thank everyone. Those who were on before, those who have joined us from everywhere in the world. We hope that the next session, we will not have any technical challenges. A very important part of the message that came out of today is that we need to have more grassroots impact. It's beyond Abuja and Lagos. The common man in the community, in the villages, who is speaking for them, who is advocating for them, who is advocating for the children, the women. There's so many people who are being marginalized, so many people who are being victimized, so many people who are being abused on a daily basis, but they don't have a voice. People die wrongfully. I said this earlier on. There are so many wrongful deaths people just going about their business. A car comes and hits them, a trailer falls on them. We had a medical doctor. I know Metu, this case really broke Metu. A medical doctor that was that fell in an elevator in a hospital in Lagos. She didn't have anybody. Till today, I don't think there's anybody that has brought a case against the elevator company and the hospital. So there's not much we need to do to reform, our justice system and to protect the rights of vulnerable Nigerians and Africans as a whole. So I want to thank you all for joining. Thank you to Equal Esther. Thank you to Chinedu Art. Thank you to Funke from Hope Behind Bars. Thank you to Metu Ogike. Thank you to my Lord, Honorable Justice Stella Anukam. And apologies once again for the technical issues. Sorry, I can't hear you. Wait, can anybody else hear Justice Anna? Oh, can anybody else hear her? Albert, can you hear her? Equal Esther, can you hear her?
No, we cannot hear her.
No, we cannot.
Okay. All right. All right. Apologies for that. So thank you, everyone. And please enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.